listening to the Fifth Down Fantasy Football Podcast with Johnny Slopes
top 3 to 5 pick next year.
and Camilla.
For the value you could have gotten at Ryan at,
I almost had 5,000 yards, but no, you don't want me. What you're saying is Wayne Gallman is the best bunches of running backs?
I guess you could say that. I guess you can put me down in the book for saying that.
We now bring you to the fifth down.
As much as we like to blow our loads on this show, we are not going to blow it all on this one episode. But we are going to have a quick little recap of our mock draft last week, as well as some extra draft strategy breakdown. We'll be doing this all summer long. Yes, you guessed it. You're listening to the Fifth Down Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Slopes, and with me, as always, is K-Mill, and we have the big KC on as well.
Hey, what's up?
All right. Yeah, last week we finished off with our 12-round mock draft, and we thought it was a good idea to have a little recap of it and take an in-depth look at different strategies that we either used in this mock or other strategies that we could have used. Just real quick, was there anything that with any of your teams that you wish that you could have done differently, guys?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing that I could have done differently was I think on a couple teams I drafted a little too much risk, and I'm going to go more in depth with that today. Typically on my fantasy football team, I'm not going to draft for risk. Doing a mock draft is kind of fun to see where it goes, but you definitely, you want if you're going through for real draft, you want to as much of a for sure thing as possible. So I think a little less risk would have done me better.
Yeah.
What about you, Casey?
For me, there's always going to be picks that I wish I would have made. I was talking to y'all earlier. I was saying how I gambled a little bit, and I wish I hadn't. There are a few people I lost. But the only main thing was one of my teams, I just waited a little too long to get a running back, and there were just some teams like that where I just waited a little too long, whether it be a tight end or a running back or something like that. Yeah, but I mean, all in all, I was pretty happy with how my teams turned out.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing around with like different strategies with each one of my teams, and I noticed a few drawbacks from each one, like especially like missing out on certain players if you stick with a certain strategy. So it made me to believe that there's really no like best strategy. It's probably better to like incorporate a couple of strategies mixed together.
Yeah, just go with the flow. I mean, that's how I feel like that's how the best drafts end up. It's just, I mean, you can go in with certain players or certain strategies you may want to do, but I mean, at some point that strategy is probably going to get messed up because somebody you wanted or something you wanted to do is going to get screwed up along the way. So I mean, just kind of going with the flow and picking who you think's the best available might be the way to go.
Most definitely.
What are you guys drinking tonight?
Well, I'm actually right now I don't have any alcohol in the house because I drank it all already. So and I just got off work like an hour ago. So right now it's coffee for me because I'm tired of shit. But later tonight it's gonna be beer.
You get a boo.
I just finished a Budweiser. Now I'm drinking a Miller Lite. So just gonna try to run through all the American beers tonight, I guess.
Gonna have it like a try one here.
Got a Coors next up on the list. So
hey,
there we go.
That's my stuff right there. Jack and Coke, but good kind of Coke.
Cocaine?
No, the good kind of Coke.
Yeah, the one.
Anyways.
More off of strippers and stuff, yeah.
Let's have a little bit of station identification. Now that it got kind of awkward. We're part of the BS Podcast Network, and we love them. We are part of the Gold Tier. You can find us at www.bspodcastnetwork.com. You can find our shows on there, as well as iTunes. Please subscribe and drop us a review. And K-Mill will model in a romper for you, I promise.
Whoa. Don't go whoring me out, man. That's just not right. But for the show, I think I might make an exception.
We can also be found on Spreaker and Stitcher for you non-iPhone users. And we would also like to announce that coming soon, our show will be on another site ran by Zach Brunner. You can find him on Twitter at the Fantasy Flurry. Follow him there for an announcement on that. Or if you're into DFS, he's big into that as well. Are you guys into DFS?
A little bit. We were actually just talking about fantasy baseball, how we were kind of doing DFS for fantasy baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I'll dabble in it a little bit. I mostly just like to bet on parlays instead of it's had more success for me, so that's just how I am. For all 50 of you listeners out there, go over to www.draftsleepers.com and join the forums now. Talk with other football minds. They are the social network for fantasy sports. I know a lot of you guys are probably playing like fantasy baseball. K-Mail, don't you? I heard you're in like second place.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well right now. It's been kind of an up and down season. It's actually a really competitive league, so we'll see where it takes us. But team's looking good right now, so we'll see where it takes me.
What about you, Casey?
In my main league, I'm in first place, so I don't want to brag. No, but it's only a 4-person league, so I mean, it's not. It's this one, the main one we did was just like me and my roommates, so we did that. But in a couple other leagues, I'm having decent years, but it's just fun. I really enjoy fantasy baseball, so.
I guess I'm the odd one out then because I've never tried it.
Yeah. We need replacements for next year, man. If you need it, we got a spot for you.
I'm afraid I'd just end up being a league downer at that point.
Yeah, we don't want that.
All right. Well, I hope both you guys got a good chance to look at the draft board that I made of our 12-round mock that we did last week. I hope you guys got to study it a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Before we dive into some of our individual picks, though, I want to talk about some specific draft strategies and how we could have tied them in with some of our teams that we had mocked. Is there like a certain draft strategy out there that any of you guys tend to favor?
Well, I think my biggest one is, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but first off, know your league mates, because if you know kind of how they're going to pick or how they're thinking beforehand, you can already have a strategy in place beforehand, and if, say, a guy falls to you, they don't pick as expected, you can scoop a guy up. But, have everything ready to go. What helps me out is a whiteboard. But definitely know your league. And then the other thing is, too, another one I like to go by is don't be afraid to take a risk, but don't do it with your top picks. Do it with, like, your middle-round picks.
Was there any specific like route that you were taking when you were deciding on which position to draft, like per round?
Yeah, I kind of this year I broke it down into if I wasn't going to get the holy trifecta of running backs for early in the first round, then I was definitely going to go receiver in the first round. So I was going to play it by that, but I was thinking a certain way. Like depending on how my first round pick went was going to kind of determine how my draft went. Like if I went receiver in the first round, then just kind of depending how the pieces fell. That's kind of how I played it.
You're trying to go with like a more balanced approach.
Exactly, and that's what I like to do for a lot of teams is a nice balanced approach. I feel like that's the best strategy because you're going to cut bait on a couple players. It just happens every year. No matter how good you think your team is on paper, you're always going to end up getting rid of some guys. You're never going to have a perfect draft. So
what you're looking for is like you're looking for the guy with the best value per round.
Exactly, yeah. And then it was like me and Casey were actually talking about it before you got on the line. These guys, don't reach for players, but, you want to get, like, if you can wait on a player, definitely do that. Don't reach for him. But at the same time, you're taking a risk because, you could be gone the next round.
Casey, what was your, what are you looking to do?
Well, like I said earlier, like you try to go with the flow, but I was trying to be specific with some of my teams. Like on the team where I had the 5th pick where I got Odell Beckham, I wanted to go ahead and try to get my receivers out of the way early, so that's what I did. And on a couple other teams, like I did things like that. Like on my first team where I picked Antonio Brown, since I got him early, I wanted to go ahead and shore up my running backs after that. So that's what I did. So, and, some teams I wanted to pick a quarterback or a tight end early, and that's what I did. So, I tried some things out, and I won't know yet if they're going to work out, and they're not stuff that I would do if I was drafting my own team. But, for these purposes of just trying out different strategies, I did do a couple other things where I was trying to do things early, get certain positions out of the way. So that's mainly the strategy I was taking.
I noticed one big thing about this draft is you both really mixed it up really well between your draft picks. Most of you guys look like you took like a value-based drafting in some form. where you're taking like the best player available that you could felt helped your team, and that's a great strategy because it's what you're trying to do with the value-based drafting is you're trying to draft the best player who's projected to score the most points that round, but you're also looking at different aspects of how much better is this player than the next best player, the next person at his possession. You know what I mean? How much better, how much more points is he actually going to score? Like if you're looking at the first round, you're looking at a running back or receiver. You see that the running backs are scoring 23 points a game, wide receivers are scoring 24 points a game. Then you look in the next tier of running backs, they're only scoring 18, and wide receivers are only scoring 20. The difference between running back and wide receiver it's a greater difference for the running back, so therefore you would draft the running back in the first round. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
I mean, you're usually going to have pretty good starting lineups if you do stuff like that, especially if you use it with your positional tiers. I think it goes really well with positional tiers. But some of the things I found that could be bad for that, it could be a disaster because you really want to have good, solid projections when you're using this kind of method. And it could be a disaster if you have bad projections. You could end up missing your target with the wrong players or even the wrong position all together. Like an example of that would be like picking like a mid-tier running back based on that player being projected higher than the next running back over a superior wide receiver. You're missing out on that wide receiver then. You know what I mean? Typically, mid-tier wide receivers are going to outscore a mid-tier running back. And also, it doesn't take into account of injuries or positional scarcity into account at all.
Yeah. You know what? I noticed that really helps me for drafting is I will actually individually. So I'll have on my whiteboard. I'll have on one side I'll have all of my players ranked as far as my draft board goes, like because I will rank every single player, and then on the other side I'll rank them by position, and then I'll track both during the draft and make my decisions that way. So then before the draft even starts, before I'm even looking at the Yahoo projections or whatever site you're playing on, you've kind of already got your mind made up on who you're taking. Like if you're looking at a guy like Julio Jones or Odell Beckham, let's think about an outside factor. Brandon Marshall went to New York. So in my mind, I'm thinking Julio higher than Odell. Just kind of have your mind made up before you even go into the draft, on which player you view in a higher standing.
It also makes it easier to see, like, who needs a quarterback or who needs a running back, and if you pick before them, you can kind of snipe them a little bit if you keep track of who's picking who.
Yeah, I was trying to do that a little bit throughout the draft, paying attention to, there was one time when on the team where you had 4 wide receivers that you drafted, and I needed a wide receiver coming up, so I was really happy to see that you were ahead of me. And then there was one time when I needed something. I can't remember what it was. I needed some position, and I saw whoever was coming up needed that, so I had to go ahead and snag them, even though I might have reached a little bit. You got to be paying attention to stuff like that.
I do know that you picked Amari Cooper right before I picked Brandon Cooks, and I wanted Amari Cooper and had to settle for Brandon Cooks, and I was not happy about that because I kind of have them in a different tier.
Yeah. I felt like Coop was
that's
the
an
last
example of that.
Yeah, Coop was like the last receiver I felt like that was in that tier of he's like the lower 1A tier of receivers.
That's actually a question for you. Would you feel comfortable with Brandon Cooks as your wide receiver 1?
I wouldn't feel comfortable with it. I mean, it could end up being really good for you, but I never, as my number 1 anything, I always get nervous if it's someone that could lose some touches, and I know I'm saying that, and I drafted Odell Beckham over Julio, but I just feel like most of the time, you should draft I'd just be worried with a player that I'm worried might lose some touches as my number 1 person. But I mean, at the same time, Brandon Cooks could end up exploding in that offense, so it could go either way.
Yeah, count me. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, K-Mill, if he picked running backs back-to-back in the second round, he took Todd Gurley, then Jay Ajayi. I was really hoping that he would pair one of those wide receivers up with another wide receiver and just be really dominant at that position, but he chose to even it out a little bit. So that's the reason why Cooper and Cooks fell where they did.
Yeah, that's true, and I really had no reasoning really behind that except for looking at my team's needs, and then and I really looked at the Todd Gurley pick, and I was like, that was one of the ones I actually wish I kind of could have taken back because I was looking at Todd Gurley, and I actually fucking hate Todd Gurley, and I don't hate him as a player, I just hate the offense he plays in, and that's one where I felt like I was taking too great of a risk, with such an early pick. Same with Jay Ajayi actually, but less so because I think that Jay Ajayi is going to be the focal point of that offense. So I definitely felt more comfortable with the Jay Ajayi pick, with my other team.
Kamo, what was your favorite team on this mock and why?
Well, I think that my team number 3, the one that picked, what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I like it, even though I did take Gurley early, like I said. I like the overall makeup of this team. It's very balanced, and it's got a lot of upside. Like I took Mike Evans in the first round. I drafted a couple of question mark running backs, but they still have high upsides, and they should no doubt see some volume. And then, Devontae Adams, he's kind of exploded in that Green Bay offense, so you got to like that. And then the real thing that I liked was Ty Montgomery in the 5th round. I think that he's a guy that I'm really looking forward to. A lot of people are very mixed on him. I think that he's going to be pretty fantastic. And then to just sum it all up, I had Jimmy Graham and then Randall Cobb. And I think Randall Cobb's the guy that a lot of people are sleeping on because he has a diminished role, but he could end up being a real sleeper and have a great season. And then Jimmy Graham, you're getting a tight end of his caliber, tight end 1. And I got relatively a balanced roster, and we're not even talking about those later picks. Like I just felt like it was a very nice team.
All right, Casey, what about you? What was your favorite team that you drafted?
My favorite team would probably have to be the first one that I drafted where I got Antonio Brown. I just feel like that one had, I don't like that Tyreek Hill is my number 2 receiver, but I've got Stephon Diggs in my flex, so I feel like with his receptions that could kind of even that out. But I feel like this team is just where I have the most balance. I don't have what I feel like is a weak spot on the team. I've got Russell Wilson at my quarterback. I've got Lamar Miller and Marshawn Lynch at my running back, Antonio Brown and Tyreek Hill, and then Greg Olsen. And like I said, Stephon Diggs in my flex. But I just feel like this team is the most balanced I've got. I don't love my bench, but I can deal with that. I'm fine with my starters.
There was a few picks that we didn't do as well, like late round picks, but overall I think it's not a bad team. I think my favorite team was actually picking at the number 2 spot. I like picking at the number 2 spot because you get 3 picks inside the top 30 as opposed to picking in the back of the first round. You get 2 picks inside the top 15, but that's it. Instead of picking number 2, you get 3 picks inside of the top 30, and you can do more with it. I decided to take best player approach at this one, and I ended up getting Le'Veon Bell, Gronk, and Aaron Rodgers. I think that can win you a league. And obviously you're going to be a little bit weak at receiver if you do something like this, but I tried to fill it in with as many wide receiver 2s as possible, and then I didn't really have a whole lot behind Bell, but it's okay. I should have a lot of top-end points coming in until a bye week after. I drafted the Kansas City defense thinking it could be a cheap version of Tyreek Hill. Apparently Tyreek Hill is not going to be on kick returns this year, so maybe he's going to be used more in the receiving game. So maybe that pick's not too bad for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, and I mean with your running backs, I know we're not really doing this as a real league, but if this were a real league, you could always look for players in the waiver that you could, running backs that you could find.
I mean, I got some okay running backs behind Bell. They're not terrible. I mean, I got Riddick, I got Procise. Terrence West should get some share of the carries over there. Who knows what you're going to get out of McNichols? It was just a late pick,
Yeah.
I bet. Casey, what was your least favorite team and why?
We were talking about this before we went on air. I don't like the team that my second team that I drafted with when I got Odell Beckham, mainly just because I do like Paul Perkins. I'm a little higher on him than I think most people are, but I don't like him as my RB2. I waited a little long to get him, but I do have good receivers. Got ODB, Amari Cooper, and Brandon Marshall. So I made up for it a little bit there, but my RB1 is Leonard Fournette. So that's someone who I think is going to have a great season, but at the same time, he could end up not being that great. So as my RB1, he makes me a little nervous. and Cam is my quarterback. So, I mean, I like this team, but it's probably the one that worries me the most. So I'd have to say that's probably the one I like the least.
What about you, K-Mill? What's your least favorite team that you drafted?
So I know my team picking out, and I hate picking out of the one spot. Like, I'll just be clear with that. I mean, and the only thing I do like about picking out of the one spot is that I got my boy David Johnson. I love him. I'll suck his dick. I'm just kidding. But, yeah, I mean, aside from the David Johnson pick, and I do like.
I already got a skit of you saying that you would blow him. And I save it, and I use it every time that you mention him, and you know it's going to be used.
So
but now I could say that you'd suck his dick, so that's even better.
Hey, I'm sorry, man. If you win leagues for me like he has, I mean, he deserves to have his dick sucked. I'm sorry. But anyways,
okay. All right.
You know, David Johnson, I love my Doug Baldwin pick. DeAndre Hopkins, I also thought I got in a really good spot. C.J. Anderson, I think, could be effective to a point, but I hate the Julian Edelman pick. I really don't know what I was thinking. I think it's probably because I got him, in the 5th round as opposed to like,
he fell.
Yeah, he did fall, and I was like, I stopped his fall, but I really don't like Edelman, and I think that New England offense, man, there's just way too many mouths to feed, and I think it's going to be so hard to predict. I think
at least he's only your wide receiver 3.
Exactly, yeah. So he's a guy that I could potentially be putting in my flex. But then I kind of made up for it. I got Derek Carr, who I feel very comfortable about. Danny Woodhead, who is always a sexy flexy. Matt Forte, and who knows with him. I actually I hate Matt Forte. I think that he's kind of getting to that point in his career where he's done. But I took him late, so whatever. And then Ryan Matthews, of course, that's a shit show.
He's gonna be relevant. He's gonna be relevant, I think.
You think so? Yeah, I mean, I'm just iffy on him. I mean, I got him with a late pick, so who knows. And then Eric Ebron, I waited way too long on a tight end, and that was actually my fault. I wasn't paying attention. And then I realized I was like, oh, fuck. Like, in my later rounds, I was like, I don't have a tight end. And then I pretty much took, like, the table scraps. And then I did get that. Yeah, I got the Denver defense, which I think will be a lot better than it was last year against the run. So that's good. And then I just took a flyer on Deion Lewis. So overall, I don't think this is a bad team, but it's like Casey said, it's the one that probably worries me the most.
All right. Like I said earlier, it seemed like most people were using you guys are going basically best player available. It seems like with a lot of your teams, there's a couple of teams that do stick out on mine that I kind of played around with, especially picking out of the 11th spot. I went 4 straight wide receivers out of the gate. I went Jordy Nelson, Des Bryant, and Jarvis Landry, then Sammy Watkins. But then I did the complete opposite from that point. I went Bilal Powell, Abdullah, Gilsey, Gore, Perrine all in a row. And then I waited real late for tight end and quarterback. I got Ertz and I got Taylor. So I mean, I kind of like that team though. It's not a bad team. Got a lot of question marks at running back, but got some running backs that could hit too. So you're just hoping that one or two of them hit, and then look on the waiver wire.
Yeah, and I mean if you've got. I know we're not gonna, like I said earlier, we're not gonna be able to trade and do stuff like that. But having a 4th receiver does give you a little bit of luxury to kind of play around in the trade market when you have a solid 4th receiver that you could put in at your flex.
I mean, especially if this is a PPR league, that kind of a strategy where you're taking a lot of receivers early, it makes a lot of sense because it's a PPR league. They're the ones that are going to be catching the ball the most. You're taking chances at potential breakout players receiving running backs or running backs in timeshares or backup running backs and good offenses. I mean, you're going to have a really strong wide receiving core, and it's a great advantage in the PPR league having the top 4 wide receivers or the top 20 wide receivers in the top 4 rounds. But every time a running back gets hurt, your lineup gets a little bit better if you have that running back on your lineup. I mean, the only cons though is you got the uncertainty at the running back position. You could be in trouble if you don't get that running back off the waivers if someone else gets them instead of you. And you're mostly focused at the running back on waivers, so you could be missing out potential breakout players at other positions too. Yeah,
and another thing I just wanted to mention too is that every year, it doesn't matter. Everybody thinks that they're drafting some people think that they're drafting a perfect team right out of the gate, which is never the case. There's always so many players that go undrafted, and then they just blow up and they become like waiver wire gold. So every year, like you did on your team, Johnny, I actually really like that team. If some of those guys don't pan out, drop them, cut bait, and then pick up a guy that you really think could, really help the team down the stretch, like a Jordan Howard, or something like that.
Kind of like Jordan Howard last year,
Exactly.
Another team there's a couple of teams that I've seen that they drafted a lot of running backs early. I know Casey in my third team, we both drafted a lot of running backs early. I mean, he got Howard, Peterson, Coleman, Murray. I got McCoy, DeMarco, and Coel. But then after that, I didn't draft a single running back after that.
Yeah.
That kind of surprised me. I didn't even realize it did it until after it already happened. All right, so let's dive into some of the most individual picks. Casey, what was your most difficult decision between two players in this draft?
At my spot at 3 was tough between Brown and Zeke, but deep down, the whole time I felt like I was going to pick Antonio Brown. There were a few spots. Probably the hardest pick in the whole draft for me was, I think Todd Gurley's going to have a bounce back season. I was banking on him falling in the draft, and he didn't, and I drafted Jordan Howard ahead of him, which I'm fine with. But that was probably the hardest one I had, was picking between those two, just because Jordan Howard just came out of nowhere, and that just always worries me in the second season of players that really break out. So that was probably my hardest pick between those two. But I mean, hopefully it'll end up working out for me.
What about you, Kamo? What was your toughest decision to make in this draft?
Well, I think I'm looking at this draft board and trying to remember where I was at, but I think that my hardest pick was probably when I was able to choose over DeMarco Murray or Michael Thomas, and I obviously chose Michael Thomas. I was going for a really balanced approach on that team, and DeMarco Murray, was sitting there, and he's very tempting because I could have had that combo of Devonta Freeman and DeMarco Murray. I mean, and that could be lethal in any league. So that was kind of tempting, but I ended up going with Michael Thomas. And then also with that same team, the next round, I also had a pretty tough decision going with should I take Travis Kelce or should I take Demaryius Thomas? Because then I have a solid 1-2 punch, for my top receivers. But I ended up going with Travis Kelce. I mean, he just was awesome last year, and I think that he's going to be the number one option in that Kansas City passing game. So I ultimately took him.
I'm kind of glad. Thomas.
I'm kind of glad that you went Michael Thomas in the second round, because then DeMarco Murray fell to me when I already had LaShawn McCoy. I was like, you know what, this is the perfect opportunity to try robust running back. And I took running back 3 of the first 4 rounds. My goal was I wanted to just get as many running backs that are going to get early down work and get high volume, That way, you kind of corner the market with the running backs, but I kind of got away from that strategy as it went on. I was like, I kind of do want to get some receivers. I love receivers. So I took some chances at wide receiver, some chances like Martavius Bryant, Deshaun Jackson, a couple of boomer bust players. Same thing with John Brown. I made sure I got a little bit of consistency there, though. I got Crowder and Beasley, so. And Demaryius Thomas. So those were the more consistent guys on my team to kind of counteract the boomer bust from the other players.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you guys tried differently in this draft? We'll start with Kamo on this one. Was there anything that you tried different in this draft that you wouldn't normally try?
Yeah, I definitely was kind of fearless, and I have 2 rules usually, and I was telling Casey about this before. I don't like to invest a lot of stock in not established players, meaning if a guy had one crazy season, I don't put a whole lot of stock into him, because he's the talk of the town, everybody is wanting a piece of him, and I'm I'm going to shy away, I want to see if this guy's for real first. So I was kind of fearless with, I'm just going to take him, and just kind of ask questions later. An example of that was the Terrell Pryor pick. I kind of was just you know what, I'm buying into this Redskins offense. I think that he's going to have a great season. And then another thing was that I mentioned earlier was I was kind of fearless as far as the, risk goes. Like, for instance, I don't usually like to get rookie players, but I end up going after McCaffrey in one of my teams, and I wouldn't normally do that. And in really any league where I'm doing my actual draft, I'd really like to stay away from rookies. Like even last year, I didn't bite on the Ezekiel Elliott thing. I was just like, man, his ADP is way too high for a rookie. I want to see how he does first. So it could end up working out as a double-edged sword, but you could also be missing out on a great player.
The first thing you said about you tend to shy away from players until they prove it. I mean, a lot of instances that's okay, but sometimes you could miss out on a player's true breakout season that way. I mean, there's numerous of examples that I could use, but I mean, see the example of when Julio passed up Roddy White to take over Atlanta's number one job. That's just like a prime example right there. So I mean, sometimes you can be passing up players by making like absolute rules like that. So maybe it's all right to take a chance on a few players on their second year. You just gotta kind of filter out who's real and who's not. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and that was my point too. Just within reason. Like I would spend your first 5 rounds should be like guys that you really truly believe in, legit guys, and then take chances with the rest of them. Get some handcuffs in the very late rounds. On your bench, because then you got insurance policies. Not even for you guys, but get other people's handcuffs. Like I love that strategy.
Casey, what was, in your opinion, the most shocking or surprising pick of this draft?
I felt like I wasn't prepared for that question. Let's see. I mean,
was there any pick that just made you go, wow?
There were a few people that went early. I mean, I felt like for even myself, like I felt like I picked Marshawn early, but after getting screwed a couple times in the draft of like waiting for players, that was someone I knew I wanted. So I feel like I reached a little bit for him. So that was probably surprising for you guys.
That one was one that stuck out to me.
Yeah, that was definitely one that was pretty surprising.
It's because it was in the third round. I could expect it maybe it was in like the fourth or fifth, but the third round is what stuck out to me.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what it was. It was I was surprised when you took Larry Fitzgerald where you did. Just because I was surprised he went ahead of like guys like Brandon Marshall, Ty Montgomery, AP, just like some of those players. Like I know you're needing a receiver there, but I was just a little surprised with the Larry Fitzgerald pick.
With the pick like that, I'm expecting 100 catches.
Yeah.
I was like, which receiver on the board right now gives me the best opportunity to get 100 catches? And it was between either him or Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Like,
and then I ended up passing up Emmanuel Sanders for Willie Snead.
Yeah, because I mean, Diggs. There was a few receivers that went right around there, like Willie Snead, Stephon Diggs, and Emmanuel Sanders. That was a good group right there of reception hogs.
I like all three of them too.
Yeah,
I actually like Emmanuel Sanders more than I like Demaryius Thomas.
I do too. I think he's I ended up drafting both of them in this draft.
For PPR, yeah, I would agree with you.
Just because I feel like they're still both, wide receiver twos that kind of get overlooked. And Demaryius Thomas, I can't remember the last time Demaryius Thomas was in the third round.
Yeah, I know.
It's just like once they get as long as they've got Trevor Siemian as their quarterback or Paxton Lynch, like I'd be just wary of their receivers in terms of a number one, like get him as your number one.
All right. I think though by far the most surprising pick for me though was by far though it has to be that K-Mill you like DeAndre Hopkins more than Allen Robinson.
Yeah, it's just so hard, man. I know that that's a surprising pick, and I do love A-Rob, but I think that this year, man, I just really have to take a step back and look at that Jaguars offense and, look at BB, and I just have absolutely no faith in him. I want no part of that Jaguars offense except for maybe Leonard Fournette. That's the only one that I'm even targeting in any draft because I'm so fearful, especially a receiver in Jacksonville. So I kind of went with DeAndre Hopkins. And my reasoning was this. When Tom Savage became the starting quarterback because Brock Coxswaller sucked so bad, I just, he started just peppering him with targets, and I feel like at least at the start of the season, he's going to DeAndre Hopkins is going to build up a lot of value, and I could potentially use him as a trade piece.
Could it just be coincidence that the moment that they take out Brock Osweiler, DeAndre Hopkins has the most targets of the season?
I don't think it can't be coincidence in my mind.
Your number one team picking out of the one slot, you had both my favorite and least favorite picks on that same team.
Really?
In the second round, you picked Doug Baldwin. In the second round, at the end of the second round, I love that pick. That was one of my favorite picks. And
yeah, I love that pick.
But you also drafted Julian Edelman, so
I know.
That just canceled it out.
That was a train wreck. I know. I should have never done that.
It's the reason why I like that Doug Baldwin pick so much is after him, he's the only receiver to get back-to-back top 10 finishes. Like DeAndre Hopkins hasn't done that. Allen Robinson hasn't done that. Alshon Jeffrey hasn't done that. Keenan Allen hasn't done that. Hell, Demaryius Thomas hasn't done that. Jarvis Landry hasn't done it. I can keep going. That's why I like that pick so much. Yeah. People that pick Doug Baldwin, they pick him because they like to win.
Definitely, yeah, and I thought that too. I looked at that as a kind of a drop off. And Doug Baldwin, man, he's a guy I've been so low on for long, but
he's the poor man's Antonio Brown.
But he really is, yeah. Like the last couple seasons, like he's been a touchdown machine, and he's gone, over 1,000, for the last 2 seasons. And when I see that kind of consistency from a player, that's when they start becoming relevant in my mind. And I'm like, this guy is for real. And getting a guy like that in the second round, that kind of production, I love that. And he's a guy that, you could, it's like Casey was saying, he's going to make a nice trade piece. He blows up a couple weeks, because we know he has a lot of multi-touchdown games, and then you flip him.
And he doesn't have a ton of competition either.
Exactly, that too.
Yep. Let's go into some of these later round picks that we had. We're talking like round 6 and above. What was your favorite gem that you got in round 7 and up, Casey?
Let's see, round 7. I'd probably have to say, I don't know. I like my Paul Perkins pick, just not as an RB2 like I said earlier. I do like him as a player. I like Latavius Murray. He fell a good bit. I have him on my bench actually, so I like that just as a player that you expect Dalvin Cook to take a good bit of carries from him, but at the same time they paid him a decent amount of money to come be the starter. So you got to expect at least at the beginning of the season he's going to get a good amount of reps. So I feel like that was a good pick for me. That was probably my best late round pick.
This is the same coaching staff that didn't start Chugwell at all.
Yeah,
that's true.
So maybe they don't use Cook that much.
Yeah. I
don't know. I'm just speculating at this point. Kama, what about you? What was your favorite late round pick?
Oh man, I think I made a lot of really good late round picks. I'm actually re-looking at it right now. So I would definitely say that my favorite one is the one that could potentially be like a league winner. And I took Corey Davis in my team picking out of the I think that's the 10 spot. Or wait, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the 10 spot.
10 spot. And I took Corey Davis, and I think that he's a guy that could, I know that he's high in a lot of people's minds, especially in Dynasty, but I think he's a guy that can make an immediate impact. And getting him that late, I really feel comfortable about that, because
I noticed you went with both Corey Davis and Mike Williams on that team.
I did, and I actually don't feel so good about the Mike Williams pick. I actually think he might be a year off because that San Diego receiving core is pretty crowded, but I definitely feel good about that Corey Davis pick because Marcus Mariota's matured as a passer, and he doesn't really have a clear number one option in there except for of course Delaney Walker. But other than that, it's kind of a shit show. Tajay Sharp, and then whatever, and then Rashard Matthews. But he's the guy that could be the clear cut number one right away.
How do you feel about that Jeremy Maclin pick now that he's with Baltimore?
I actually like it a lot better that he's not with Kansas City anymore. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, he would have went a lot. He would have went a lot higher if that trade happened before our draft. I feel like
he just went into a high volume offense, a team that's thrown the most over the last 2 years.
And someone that's kind of desperate for like a star receiver. I mean, Mike Wallace has done good, but they don't have that big name. I mean, Steve Smith was there, but he didn't put up the numbers that he did the first year he came there.
Overall at wide receiver, where would you guys rank Jeremy Maclin at wide receiver? Like, when does he come off the board now?
I think that.
Where does he finish at the end of the year?
I think that. I think he could end up being, I mean, solid top like 20, 25 wide receiver. I mean, he's going to end up being like he could with the upside of like a top 15. So I mean, I think if you're doing like if we did a redraft today, I think he probably goes a round or two earlier just because he's going to get a lot more volume. He's got a quarterback who will actually throw it farther than 5 yards. So I mean, I just feel like that's going to help him out a good bit.
See, I actually
think
he's
K-Mill, you drafted him.
Yeah, I think he's actually going to go quite a bit higher than that. I think he's going to go somewhere around probably, actually, now that I'm looking at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think he could go as soon as like maybe the 7th round. I think that those kind of guys, I think that he's in that tier now. I think that safely I can say definitely safely wide receiver 3 numbers with upside of like really high wide receiver 2 numbers, maybe even higher.
I planted our flag on Twitter as wide receiver 28 is a finish. So I'd finish him as a high wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I mean, like, but it's a wide receiver 3.
He has upside though. So I could definitely see him finishing in the wide receiver 2 territory. It'd be interesting to see where his ADP goes, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Is there any tips that you would want to give people when it comes to draft strategy? I'll let either one of you guys take this.
I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, I would just say go with the flow. I mean, you can go, like, every year I go in with certain players that I think are going late that I want to look for and things like that. But in terms of, like, going in and saying, okay, I'm going to draft receivers here or I'm going to draft running backs here, like, I just think it's better to kind of just pick who you think is the best available. And, I mean, don't be afraid to reach a little bit for somebody because, I mean, those are the things that can win you a league. If you reach a little bit for somebody because you're worried they're not going to be there. But just don't think too much about it. I mean, it's kind of like when you're taking a test, like, just go with your gut. Like, don't think too much about it. Just pick who you think is going to be better, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I mean, it's fantasy. Like, you just never know.
I like to do actually just quite the opposite. I like to go against the flow. Like, whatever the flow may be, I like to just try to do the opposite. Try to do like an upside-down draft. I know this is actually a draft that people like to implement when they're, like, picking at the back of the first round. You know, the objective you're trying to use is to pay close attention or keep track of, like, wherever everyone's drafting and see, like, positional runs. So you can adjust those runs and just do the opposite. It goes really good if you have good positional tiers. This strategy is very effective. I do. This is one of my favorite things to do. Is the idea, you know, you're getting the opposite to get the higher tier guy by avoiding the positional runs. Which, I mean, it's basically asking, would you rather have running back 14 or wide receiver 10, you know?
That's true. Yeah, definitely. And then, you know, like, it's like, you know, I was just saying, you know, you're always going to find wire gems. You know, if you draft for value like that with that strategy, I think that's pretty effective because then you at least have one position short up.
You're usually going to have a stronger starting lineup that way, and you're avoiding positional runs, so you probably can sometimes create your own positional runs, especially if you're picking at the turn. You kind of let the draft come to you, and it allows you to be very flexible. That's what I like about using that.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed that kind of like about that though is you end up not really being strong at any position, but you're good in all of them. So I mean, if you don't tier your players right, you could just miss out on some talent altogether too. So that's another downside.
Right, and then one of your positions could be a barren wasteland if you wait too long, you know. So it just adds further credence to you know, make sure you have a somewhat balanced approach at least at some point. I think my biggest strategy, honestly, is like like just before your draft, I mean, just take like 20 minutes and map out at least the first couple rounds and like rank these guys and see where you like these guys. Like, do you like Julio Jones? Do you like Odell Beckham? Do you like Le'Veon Bell over David? You know, whatever it may be. You know, like look at how you want these guys and how you rank them, and then you can see how people are picking, and then you can see who you have ranked next. And you can be like, oh, well, you know, I like this guy better than this guy, and you don't have to sit here and use the entire minute of your pick. You know, you kind of already have an idea of who you want.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the beauty of having good positional tiers is you can see your targets and you can see your values right there in front of you, and you know where your targets are at, and you'll know, okay, once this guy's taken, I need to jump on this position because it's a big drop off from here. And or you can say, you know what, he's the first guy taken in the tier. I can wait. I can still get a guy in that tier. I don't have to wait. I can just get him right now.
And that's how I do a lot of times. Like when I say I go with the flow, like I'll be looking at players. Like there was a pick, I can't remember who it was. Like what you said with Amari Cooper earlier. I mean, like I felt like there was a little bit of a drop off in terms of tiers of receivers, and so like you got to kind of look for that. Like when I picked Greg Olsen, I wanted to get a good tight end for that team, and not to say that the ones coming up weren't good, but I just felt like Greg Olsen was the last of like the top tier tight ends, because after that you've got like Tyler Eifert and Jimmy Graham, who are good, but they're just a little more inconsistent. So like,
and can we talk about Tyler Eifert real fast? Because I'm glad to see that he fell a little bit in this draft, but I think it's absurd that he is the 5th tight end off the board, and he's typically going in the back of the 5th round, and I think that's absurd. Why is he being drafted there?
Yeah,
I mean, obviously that didn't happen in our draft, but I'm just saying I've been seeing it in a lot of other drafts.
Yeah, I mean, he went like he should be. I feel like he should be ranked behind Jimmy Graham and Delaney Walker, but he was ranked ahead of both of them. So I mean, I just don't get that with people with Tyler Eifert, because I mean he's been good in the past, and obviously he had the breakout season a couple years ago. But in terms, I'd rather go with a tight end who I know is going to get a lot of looks and a lot of targets, rather than someone who is almost purely going to be a red zone target. Like, obviously you want touchdowns in your tight end, but that can be a hit or miss category. So I'd rather go with someone who I know is going to get me receptions and yards and then could get the touchdown as an upside rather than having to rely on the touchdowns for my point.
And we all know what Tyler Eifert brings to the board. We know what he can bring to the table, but you also know that he tends to be a little bit injury prone, and you should have a backup plan if you have him on your team. And Kamo, you failed to draft another tight end behind Eifert. Instead, you took New England's defense over the perfect guy to back him up would have been Jack Doyle.
Yeah, you know, I just kind of I felt like, you know, and I know that I was drafting with risk, and like I said, I was kind of just fearless, but I just kind of went with shoring up all the positions first and then picking backups. But that's a good point. I didn't even see that, you know, until now.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's another problem about picking your starting lineup completely before taking your bench is you tend to miss out on those guys that could be potential breakout candidates, you know, like Jack Doyle.
Most definitely.
Will you apologize to Jack Doyle?
Sorry, Jack Doyle.
One last thing I want to talk about before we start to shut this down is how in the fuck did we not draft Matt Ryan in this mock draft?
Yeah, that is very puzzling.
Someone pointed that out to us on Twitter. It's like, you know what? I don't know. I have no idea how that happened. It's not that I'm I'm a little bit lower on him than I was last year. Or even though I know where he finished last year, but I'm still a little bit lower on him, but not that much lower. I could probably have him at like 5 or 6 if I had to rank him. And that means he'd be getting drafted right between like Derek Carr and Cam Newton. I think I like him a little bit more than Cam Newton.
Like when they pointed that out on Twitter, I felt like we were all just looking at each other like, oh shit, I just couldn't believe that. Like, yeah, because I mean, obviously we would have drafted him before a lot of the quarterbacks that were taken, but I mean,
I have a team that only has Tyrod Taylor. I could have just drafted Matt Ryan instead.
Yeah, like that's a risky run. I mean, when you're just kind of keeping up with it on your own, and we were kind of moving fast, so it was easy to kind of let somebody slip by.
I think there was a couple of values that happened because of that too.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I want to briefly mention something about Matt Ryan. I remember last year, our good buddy Matt that we play in a league with, he actually had Matt Ryan. He drafted him extremely late, like a lot of people did, and he was like, oh, and then he just cut him like first week of the season, and then all of a sudden he had like the breakout from hell, and then like, you know, everybody's all about Matt Ryan. But he was like, I kept telling him, I was like, dude, you're going to want Matt Ryan on your team. Like, just keep him. You know, I think he's going to be pretty solid this year. And, you know, boom. Like, I can't believe how many people, like, ended up dropping Matt Ryan, you know, the first couple weeks.
Yeah, that happened in my league.
He had Arian Foster on his team. He didn't need him.
Yeah, I know, right? So-called stud.
Like, he's a stud.
Yeah, he's a stud.
So always start your studs.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. Not.
All right. Yeah, I mean that's just one little thing that I did notice though about Tyler Eifert. You needed to draft a backup tight end. You didn't do it. Shame on you.
Yeah, I know, and I admitted it. I fully admitted it. I did it. I did like my whatever, you know, with risk. You know, I just was kind of freewheeling it, and I didn't really realize. And now looking back, I do realize there was some risks that could have. I should have drafted some insurance policies.
That's what the waiver wire for.
Hopefully within the next week or two, though. I was reading through our messages on Twitter, and our good friend PK, he messaged us like almost 2 weeks ago. I can't believe I didn't answer him. That was crazy, but he wanted to like organize like a 12-team mock draft with like 12 actual people. And I think that would be pretty good to join, don't you guys think?
I think that would be awesome.
You could turn it into an episode.
Yeah, and actually like draft with other experts. I think that would be awesome.
Maybe we'll have just our picks though. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll have to figure it out.
Yeah, I think our picks would be good. Like we can draft where we are, and then we could react to their picks.
Well, we could have the draft, then have a like a reaction episode afterward.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll keep track of it, and then I'll make the draft board again. It's gonna be great, fifth downers. We're gonna be doing a lot of this summer. We're gonna be doing a lot of draft strategies. I think that is a lot more helpful than just making like speculation articles, you know.
Yeah,
definitely.
But we are looking to add some talent, so we should have some articles out soon. But for right now, we're just going strong with the podcast. Hoping to try to crank it up a little bit here because it's getting, you know, to the fantasy hot zone. You know, everything's heating up. If you like this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. That'd be greatly appreciated. Subscribe that shit. Check us out on Spreaker and Stitcher for you non-iPhone users. Is there anything else that you guys would like to say before we end this episode?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I'm pretty solid.
But no, for real, Kimo, if people start giving us reviews on iTunes, you're gonna model it in a romper. It's gonna be hot.
All right, man. I'll model in a romper, but you gotta buy it. I'm not spending money on that shit.
If we get 5 reviews, I'll do it.
Oh shit! All right, well it's on then.
All right. That'll do it for today's show. Have a nice night and enjoy. People that pick Doug Baldwin, they pick them because they like to win.